Thanks for joining us, Tobia. Do you want to just start off and just tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up and what your childhood was like?
Well, thank you for having me, Rory. I am Italian, so I grew up in a small town next to Milan called Novara. It's kind of in between Milan and Torino, and I was there all my childhood, all the way till I went to university. Then I moved to the UK. From when I was a kid, I was always like into films. And I knew I wanted to do something about filmmaking. My family didn't believe in having a TV at home, so we kind of would go to the cinema very often. And I didn't. Eventually, when I was like maybe a teenager, I managed to connect like a VHS to an antenna to a monitor for a computer I had at home, so I could actually see TV. But it was all kind of jerry-rigged, but I never really had TV, so I had VHS tapes where I was going to the cinema, and that's how I didn't even know about commercials. I just knew that there were these annoying things that people need to fast forward when or you need to wait for a bit before the movie comes back in. And at the beginning, I was like really into special effects. I was like, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, I want to do special effects for movies. And I got like a little mini DV camera as a present one year from my parents, and I would play with my friends, and we would put like some little kind of fireworks in miniature cars and make them explode and things like that, and do little films. But then by the time I kind of was at the end of high school and I had to pick what to do in the future, already like most visual effects were done on the computer. And then I was like, oh, I don't really want to sit in front of a computer all day. And so I kind of I was like, oh, let's see what else I can do in the filmmaking. And I wasn't like a super knowledgeable about the filmmaking process, so I didn't even know all the various roles. I know that there was a director, and that was kind of pretty much one of the main thing I knew. And my parents were like super supportive, so they kind of we went around checking film schools, and I went to a little film school in Italy, in Genova, where it was like a bit of a general over, where you learn a little bit of everything, and you do a little short at the end. And but at the same time, I applied to film schools in the UK, and I got in the London International Film School, which was great, because I got, we got to shoot on films, and it was like every term you would shoot a little short, and you would crew up with other people in your term, and and I worked on many short films over the years. It was like a 2-year program, and then for your graduation film, you had you get your to team up with some other people, and you had another year to do graduation films. And at the beginning, I was kind of thinking, oh, maybe I should be a director. But then after the first couple of terms, I kind of really got into cinematography, and I was really interested in cameras and lighting. And so I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. And so then I specialized. You cannot do your own thing. You specialize by doing. So I did lots of graduation films at film school, and then I was out in the world, and I had to kind of start making some money. And basically I we would all crew up on each other's films with other, school friends and stuff. And I started in the camera department as an AC. And I was focus pulling for a few years, but it was not a very there is the traditional steps or ladder to get to become a DP. That is you do a certain amount of years as the second AC, and then a certain amount of years as the first AC, then camera operator, and then eventually DP. I kind of did a little bit more like what people do nowadays as well. Is you go to film school, do a little bit of crewing after film school, but you still shoot as many projects as you can as a DP, and then eventually you manage to do the jump without having to do all the traditional steps. So I started doing lots of, I was doing short films, music videos, and then eventually I got a couple of directors that I was working with that they start doing some commercials, and they start bringing me on, and that kind of like was the more or less the natural transition into doing commercials. Even if when I started film school, it was like I wanted to do films, and then eventually I was like, oh, commercials is actually, they're pretty fun. You get to play with lots of cool equipment. You get to travel the world. You get paid pretty well. And so, I've basically been doing commercials now for, I think, more than 10 years. Yeah. Well, no, 20 years. I finished film school in 2002. So, I guess like a few years after film school, I started doing the first few. And the rest is kind of like is history. Now I started this year. I've been trying to get back into narrative. So every year I try to do a film. I haven't managed to do any TV yet, but so I try to do films and then eventually, do commercials in between. But it's a much kind of longer commitment, and you need to really like the scripts and the people, and with the family, it's all the things you need to kind of juggle a little bit. So it's kind of like it's not as a straightforward path, and but the commercials is much easier to manage, even if you still don't really have any. With commercials, you never know what you're doing kind of next week in a way. So it's kind of like very difficult to plan your life, or, like holidays and things like that. But, like slowly learning how to manage all of that.
Yeah, I think most people kind of start filmmaking with the idea of like getting into feature films, and then it's not until later they realize that it's a big commitment. Like you're going to have to spend months and months away, like you said, from your family. You never know who the people are. Like you'll be stuck there on a project for months that you don't like. So yeah, it kind of changes your mindset when you think about all that stuff. And a commercial is only a few days where you can go in and out.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think commercials, is like kind of like usually they're quite short and sweet, and like the good thing about car commercials is that maybe you get a few more days than if it was a comedy spot or like something like that, or like where you are much more, it can be like a one day and you're done. But like in the car world, you still get to travel to locations, because it's kind of like people want to see their car driving in amazing locations. You get to have a few days, usually, even if they're shrinking, but like you still can get the odd 10-day here and there, and because anyway the cars driving, there's only certain time of the days that they look really nice, and like but the days where you would do like one shot or few frames per day, they're kind of long gone now. It's like you need to produce an incredible amount of materials every day. But how I kind of like just as a tangent, but how I kind of got to come to LA, I did like that was back in 2012 or something. I did this big campaign for Hyundai, and we shot, I think it was like 20 days or something like that, 20, 25, and it was like all over we were in Korea for a bit, we were in Germany, Macedonia, Italy, Spain, a whole bunch of different countries. And it was literally like, very few boards in each country, but you need to travel there, scout, and shoot. And then like, all of a sudden I was like, oh, maybe we can go and check out LA. And that's how we, we came here, saying like, it was like a little bit of we had a buffer, we were like, okay, this year we worked, a lot, so I can let's go to LA and check it out.
Yeah, it seems like LA is kind of where a lot of people kind of gravitate to when it comes to like commercials or filmmaking in general.
Yeah, yeah. No, totally.
So,
LA is a great spot for that. This year has been a bit of an odd year, especially for all the folks working in film and TV with all the strikes. But hopefully it gets back on track relatively soon. And but yes, LA is kind of like there is lots of good projects being originated from LA. I didn't know many people. So I spent literally the first few months I was here meeting as many people as I could. And I wrote to lots of people, wrote emails. And here in the US, people are kind of like generally much more responsive, I feel, than in other countries to kind of like random out of the blue emails. And I got to meet lots of directors and producers and production companies and stuff. And Ben was one of the first few I met. And then like, I don't remember what was the first thing we did together, but we did a bunch of Volkswagens with him. Then we did this Genesis. Last time that there was a solar eclipse, that I think it was like a few years ago, we did this Mitsubishi project, Mitsubishi Eclipse, where we shot it during the solar eclipse, which was a fun little project. We went to Oregon, and we basically had like whatever the length of the total solar eclipse to shoot it, and then we shot a few other things earlier on, and then we but I don't remember which one was the first one, but I kind of like kept in touch. Every once in a while we would meet for coffees and chat about things, and then I think eventually he called me for some projects that then it didn't work, but then eventually we did a few together. We did one together, and then I guess he was happy, and so we did a few more, and then like over the years we did a few other things. This year we did he's trying to do a feature film, so we shot this teaser for his feature, and so it's kind of like it's a good it's always good fun to work with him. It's like he was great, crazy ideas. At the time, I think with Donut Media, they were also writing their own ideas and stuff, so it was kind of like a fun kind of cool idea. And Genesis were all up for it, and they were like, oh yeah, let's do it, because you also need to get a client where they're okay about drifting and like past the speed limits. Usually you have a team of lawyers and legal people just there on the shoot saying like, oh, I think you're going a little bit too fast. Like there is all these people and these comments you get all the time because you're there with in the arm car with like the director and the driver, the arm operator, and your focus puller, AC, and then once you do something and you're happy, the director would on the walkie communicate with the producer that is in the van at Video Village with the client and agency and say like, oh, I'm really happy with this, or what do you guys think? And then you get notes, like it could be that they love it, or it could be like, oh yeah, maybe it was a bit too fast, maybe you guys should slow down, or it's kind of rare you get the opposite comment that is like, oh, you should go faster. But,
are there any rules like you can't go over a certain speed limit? I know like some people use drones to show it going faster, or the camera car will go faster, but the actual car itself has to go like a certain speed. I guess don't break the speed limit.
I think like it's not super precise. It's more how it feels on the screen. I think for cars, it's always a bit more. You need to tend to kind of really stick to the rules of the road. So like many times you need to signal if you're overtaking or changing lanes, or like you can't go over a yellow line. There are all these things that maybe you can change it in post and stuff, but like by default they flag it off if you do something like that. But then like if the project is not for like if it's a tire project, or if it's oil for the engine, or like all these kind of things that they're not actually a car, then it's much more relaxed, the whole thing, because it's like you don't have a legal obligation to portray the vehicle doing certain things. So if it's a tire commercial, you can go as crazy as you want. Like actually, you can show them that you can, the tire is still holding on, even if you do some crazy drifts or, like whatever. But then, like every once in a while, you get projects like that one where the client is on board and it's like, oh yeah, it's great. Or, like I did like a Mercedes one not too long ago during the pandemic, and it was like the whole concept was like kind of soccer moms bringing the kids to practice, but they would drive like super crazy, and so that's they were like, oh yeah, let's go as fast as you possibly can. And it was like, great. But that's kind of like is more like the exception to the rule, the norm,
And there's another one on your Vimeo with like a celebrity, like Kevin Durant, the basketball player. Like, what's it like working with celebrities? Like, I'm sure you only had a limited amount of time.
So that project I did for with Kevin Durant was like just for this Chinese car brand. I don't think it got to the US. I don't think it's here, but like I think they're just launching in Mexico because they called me for a project that we need to shoot in Mexico because they're launching there. But it was a fun project. It was like that was one of those out of the blue projects. I was doing something. I was on another shoot in I think in Chile or something, and they called me up, and it was through my agent. They needed somebody that was shooting, knew how to shoot cars, and the director was from Korea. And so then we were like, okay, it's this job with Kevin Durant, where the shoot is in San Francisco. So I had to do a bunch of calls with them while I was in South America, which was like the time difference with Korea was quite complicated, but we got it done. There was the language barrier as well because the director didn't speak a word of English, so we had a translator. But it was a fun project. At the end of the day, whenever you work with a celebrity, you have them for very, very short time. Like I think like the deal with Kevin Durant was that we had him for, I think it was like, we had him over 2 days, but it was like one day we did the basketball part. We had this body double. He has an official body double guy that from behind looks just like him. So we had the body double all day, and we had him for like maybe an hour. I think we had like maybe four or five cameras set up to get all the angles from one to the other. And then he also had to do stills. So it was like, maybe it was like 45 minutes for motion and 15, 20 minutes for stills. And then like the next day we had him for another maybe half an hour or something to do the driving shots, which we kind of like, we ended up doing most of them, I think, on green screen with just the car stopped, parked. And yeah, that was pretty much what we had him for. I think like he also, was not in a great mood, I think, in the rounds, but, but yeah, it was fun. We had, it was good to work with him.
So how do you like make sure everything's kind of lit and exposed, and like you kind of have somebody else like a body double, like you said, like a stand-in, you kind of get everything, you rehearse the shots, and then it's a matter of bringing in the celebrity, like, because you don't want to be like, oh, I just like, let's adjust the light a little bit, oh, let's wait a minute, like reset. They're going to be like, oh, ain't more angrier than.
We did it. We had, I think we pre-lit one day. So we had a day to pre-light the gym, for example, where we did all the basketball. And then the next day we shot, and we started the day with shooting every shot that you would see Kevin Durant just from behind, or the feet or things like that. So any shot where you wouldn't see his face, we would shoot beforehand. and then like he would be on just for whenever you see his face. So it was actually not too many of the shots, but it's still, we had to do like, we lined up as much as possible because, these people, they're, like that's not what they do. And they kind of don't want to redo things over and over again, even if like, with films, you do, okay, let's do one take looking at your face. Let's do one take, profile, so there's lots of maybe things you need to do over. So that's why we had like lots of cameras to try to cover as many angles in one go. And and just try to be as efficient and mindful of his time, because he's obviously really busy. And at the time he was playing in Golden State with Golden State, so we were shooting in San Francisco. And and then the next day, obviously Kevin Durant, to ensure him to drive for real and stuff like that, I think it would have been kind of crazy. So like we had to shoot with the car parked and a bunch of green screens around it, and just do lighting gags so that it feels like it's driving, and the car is moving even if it's not. Also, like like he's so tall that like he's not, like even if that car was not small, but it's like it's still like, his knees were literally like like he had to find some weird yoga position to get into the car and stuff. And so I'm sure it was also another thing added on to the safety of stuff. And so we did all those stuff with him, and then he left, and then we did all finished off the day with the body double. And then all the driving stuff, including the stunt where the car jumps over one of the hills, that was all done with the precision drivers. Because anyway, for most of the driving stuff, you kind of tend to have like a slightly heavier tinting on the windows than maybe for the interiors where you see talent, because like most of the time is like a precision driver and it's not the real talent. Lots of these precision drivers, they are also actors, so sometimes they are actually the face of the brand. So like but sometimes they're not. So it's like really depends. And so like when you do the arm car and stunts, you have very very specific drivers that can do that, and that they're trained. And then when obviously Kevin Durant is not, so then it was like, so you have like whenever we did these shots, you with the real talent, you usually tend to peel off the tinting from the window so you see their faces, and then you reapply tinting, different percentage according to client taste or directors or whatever requirements. But usually when you do driving, you have a bit heavier tints, so you still maybe see the person, but you don't clearly see that it's not.
Do you use like a polarizing filter or anything to try to like make up?
Yeah, it kind of depends, but yeah, polarizer is a great tool you can use for getting rid of unwanted reflections or adding reflections. Like maybe you want to do a shot where you want to see you see maybe from a slightly from a high angle looking down, and you want to see the reflections of the buildings or maybe of clouds and things like that on the sheet metal of the car. So you can use the polarizer to either take away reflections or make it more stand out more. And then that's pretty much like there is another there's a filter I kind of like really love using, that's called it's called attenuators. There is different intensity, and it's basically the equivalent of a ND filter, a grad, but instead of being usually the grads are filters that the half of it is a clear glass and the other half is a grad going to, whatever intensity you want. But because alpha is clear, you always see the, wherever the meeting point, wherever is indeed. So it's a bit like as if you do a power window and you move the camera a lot, then you would see this line where it's darker that is kind of moving across the screen. The attenuator is the same concept, but basically it starts, it's all the way through the filter. So at the bottom, let's say, it's an attenuator 0.9. It means that the very top of the filter is 0.9 MD, and the very bottom of the filter is clear, but it kind of really gradually goes throughout the image. That way, it's kind of quite nice to, you can use it on the arm car without noticing it, and kind of reduces the sky, because usually the sky is always kind of really bright, so you want to always try to reduce it a little bit. And that way you can pan, tilt, move the camera, and you don't notice it. So that's kind of my kind of main filter I use all the time, and then polarizers, and then those are kind of the ones that I have all the time. That everything else, it could be like, oh, maybe you want something specific, like some specific filter that enhances flares, or like reduces contrast. But like nowadays with digital, it's kind of like, I feel you use less filters than you would on film. On film you are using lots of filters, even colors and different things. On digital, like at least I use a bit less glass filters in front of the lens.
Yeah. So in terms of like commercials that you've done recently, like would the Honda one be kind of something that you've done recently, or like what was that project like? It seems like there was a lot of vehicles. Was a lot of like CGI involved? And
that was a lot of CGI. That project, it was a fun project. Is with this other is this British director friend of mine. His name is Paul Mitchell. He does lots of VFX jobs in general, and that one we shot it here in the Dry Lake bed Mirage, and lots of those cars are done in CG. We shot all the peoples inside all the cars just in front of green screens, and then we had like we had the motorcycle, and then we had some of the cars. I think we had a couple of the cars, but then everything else was CG, and then we just had a car with trapping markers on it that we would use as a stand-in car to do our moves, and then we would, they would rebuild the car on top of basically that stand-in car. And then there was because we shot it in the middle of the, not in the middle of the pandemic, but towards the end of the pandemic, but it was still not super easy to travel. Then there was another unit that they shot, like in Namibia. They shot some of the sand dunes stuff, and then we kind of all combined it together. But that was a fun project. Lots of because there were lots of elements and lots of post involved. There was quite a long prep. In that case, we had like sort of animatic of previews already of the commercial, and now we should do every shots because of the complexity of the post. You kind of need to try. They need to start working on those effects and things before we did our shoot. So we needed to kind of be as close to those as possible, so they didn't do something for nothing kind of thing.
Yeah, it looks awesome, and it's like chaos, like like where's everything going? But yeah, it looks controlled chaos, I guess.
Endless calls with all these different teams of people. I think the post maybe was in it was one of these big post company that did the effects, and I think maybe they were in Australia or something. I just remember lots of calls with at very odd times of the day. I think at the time I was in the UK as well. We had all these calls to coordinate this shoot. The shoot itself was relatively simple. It was nothing too crazy. It was quite simple. We had a green screen set up. Then we did all the bit with the drawings at the beginning, where we built a tent in the middle of the desert to make it cut the sunlight completely, where there was the desk and stuff, and then we just shot it during the middle time of the day when the light was not great. We shot all that part. And then we had all this setup in front of green screen with different car seats, where we had the talent, where we would shoot just basically the upper part of their body. And then we did a whole bunch of driving with the motorcycle and with the car. And that was but yeah, we did a bunch of those. And that was, it was a 1-day shoot in America, and then we had a one day in Namibia as well.
So you went from the Jaguar model, like little model, and now you're dropping an entire living room out of a airplane. What was that like?
My first project here in LA was for Marlboro. We did this kind of big commercials that I don't really know where they kind of showcase them, because I think they're not allowed to post them anywhere. That's why they even don't give you a link, or they never show you the finished project. And we shot it here in LA, and I met a producer on this job. And then a few years later, he called me up and he was like, "Hey, I have a project. Would you be interested? We are dropping a living room off a plane for real." I was like, "Oh, yeah, that sounds kind of fun." And so then I spoke with the director, was from the UK. We had a call. But yeah, basically in Arizona, there is this place where you can drop stuff from the sky. So we flew in there. There was this big, huge propeller plane. I think it's called C1. I don't remember the technical name, but it has the cargo area. And they built this living room on these platforms that have this little kind of flaps kind of thing to manage to, in theory, on paper, they were like, okay, you shouldn't kind of keep flipping through the sky. You should kind of stay still. And we had a team of skydivers with parachutes and helmet cams jumping. And then there was this professional skydiver that does all this Red Bull skydiving stuff, that he literally even did, like, I think he even jumped from a plane without a parachute, and then kind of midair met with somebody with a parachute or something like crazy like that. And he was sitting on the sofa playing video games on this makeup living room while it was falling to the ground. And then just before it crashes, he would kind of detach himself and land safely with a parachute. And so we had, obviously we couldn't do it too many times. We had three living rooms. But every time the plane would need to kind of like, it was quite a long reset from like, loading the thing on, and then like go like, take off, and then be on the drop zone, drop it. Then the plane would need to land again. It was kind of like a half a day reset in between each take kind of thing. And then we had a team of people on the ground with super long, like 2000 millimeter lenses, filming the drop, and a bunch of like cameras rigged to the plane. And we did like the actual drop, we did it 3 times. Well, we did 2 times, then the plane broke down. So the third living room, we had to go back, I think a week later or something to do it again. And then we shot the day before, we shot with basically the plane just parked, all the bit leading up to, because it begins with like this guy that is just there on the sofa playing video games or watching TV with a cat next to him, and then eventually you see the light turning green, and you have this kind of like the back of the plane opens up, and you're like, oh shit, we're in a plane, and then this thing drop, and then you're like, but at the beginning you just think that you are in a normal kind of living room, and so then we did a day on the tarmac. That the hardest part was the day where we did the guy in there, because it was all shot inside the plane. And because it was parked, it couldn't have the air conditioning on. And being Arizona, you can only imagine the temperature inside that plane. It was kind of like, it was crazy hot. Like people were kind of almost fainting. Then the actual drop was fun and exciting, and up with this plane dropping something that in theory shouldn't land on top of you, but
So how did you get like some of the shots? Like, was there another
everything was done
skydiver with like
practical.
what
The
kind of
only
camera? Did they have
two
like a helmet
shots that we
cam
didn't
or?
do practical is the close up of the cat uh, landing kind of thing that we did in front of a blue screen, and the really tight close up on the guy because it wasn't safe for the skydivers, camera operators to be too close to the because you never know if the platform flips, they could basically hit them and stuff and knock them unconscious and whatnot.
Yeah, it looks like the one where
Yeah,
he's
but very,
drinking the
very few
drink.
of those
That looks
shots
like
were
it's on the
actually
blue
blue
screen.
screen. Is like lots of people, everybody was like, oh yeah, the post is amazing. We were like, actually, most of it is done for real. But we had this team that does a bunch of movies. They did all the drop zones and all those kind of classics with like skydiver scenes and stuff like that. So they basically have a helmet with a camera built in on top. And they have a little, they don't really see what the camera see, but they have like almost like a target thing with a cross that they kind of have in front of their eye, and they know that if the cross is on the subject, that the subject is in frame, kind of thing. Obviously, you cannot do it too many times. We did, I think we did, yeah, it was like 3 times for the living room, and then we did maybe 1 or 2 drops of the guy just with the parachute himself. But then I don't know how much they actually use, because I think they cut from him kind of on the thing and then the thing crashing to them him landing. But we did shoot a bunch of him just skydiving normally as well. And that, but that was kind of like all dependent on those guys before jumping. They would check the exposure looking good, because then they cannot adjust it once they jump, and then press record and jump out of the plane.
And then
Yeah, we had a few GoPros
like
on the
GoPros
actual
strapped to the
platform.
actual.
We had a GoPro on the plane, on the outside of the plane, I think, looking back.
And
just
how
smash
did
on
you
the ground, and
save
we
the
were
GoPros?
hoping
Like, did they just
for it to
smash on the ground and
survive,
you get the?
at least the card. I think uh, I think most of them got destroyed, but we actually got the chip out of the hardest thing was actually to find them, because it was like the living room, once it got to the ground, it became like in the cartoons when like something really heavy passes on top of Mickey Mouse or something, and it become like a sheet of paper kind of thing. It was like everything became flat, like it was so like there were all these things, but everything, like just the force of a drop from the plane. And so then it was like we had like to try to find it. It was like, where did it go? But then eventually we found it. We had also like a 360 GoPro rig on it, but I don't think it survived. I think like I think they never managed to get, because there were quite a few GoPro to do the 360, and I think they only managed to, they always get some, but they were never all of them, so you could never do the 360 kind of thing. But yeah, but the GoPro were kind of like goners, most of them, but I think few of the takes we managed to keep it, and that was kind of like, that is kind of nice. But yeah, that was kind of like a fun little.
Yeah, you don't get to do that every day, I'm sure.
It's funny because like after we did the first take, everybody was super excited, and I think most of the clients, they were like, "Oh, can we actually just?" They left, and then they were like, they went skydiving themselves. Then we did the other takes ourselves, but it was kind of funny. And they were like, "Oh yeah, can we just?" I'm like, "Okay, sure." So they just went skydiving. The whole team did a bunch of jobs.
Thanks so much for talking with us. And just as like a closing thought, like if you had any advice for somebody who wanted to kind of get into commercials, maybe car commercials as a DP, like some general advice on what they could do to kind of get there.
Well, I think like nowadays people have like huge advantage, I think, to get into commercials, and that it's really easy to produce content, and you can get really kind of great image out of cameras that are very accessible to anybody. So I think like it's all about the idea, and so like try to if you want to be a DP, you need to find some directors that they you kind of like admire their work. Like if you're starting out at the same time, that you have a similar sensibility, and try to shoot as many personal projects as possible. And I think that way is the easier way to get noticed and start working. I think like the times of the traditional kind of path with the camera department, do certain amount of years, this and that, and go through the ranks, I think are kind of long gone. And I think like nowadays everything is so easy to, it's all about having a good idea, like the gear to do it. You can have access, obviously if you want to do a car driving, maybe, an armed car, you might not be able to afford it, but, maybe you can find some smart ways of different ways to do it, where maybe the car is not driving, it's about the actors, but there is a car, or maybe the car is driving and you use a drone, and maybe it's easier to manage, or, and just produce as much stuff as you can. I think, nowadays there is a much bigger competition, because like things are much easier accessible to anybody. So like that I feel is kind of like a good thing. Competition is always nice. And I think like, don't be scared of asking if you don't know how to do stuff. Like, like get, reach out to people. I think people, I feel cinematographers are, usually pretty friendly people. And, we're happy to, share any knowledge or tip that we might have. We don't hold it as secret. So like, I think like just shoot as much as you can, and don't be afraid to ask for any advice.